Hello everybody and welcome to your week 5 instructor corner as we will go over some of the topics we're looking at this week and give you some more insight of what we're discussing this week in our discussion board and looking at your last assignment here in week 5 and wrapping up the class. Interesting 2 chapters left in our book that we're looking at this week. The first one of course is conflict management, and we've talked about conflict a little bit before. We had an incident in looking previously at a boyfriend attacking a patient. But in this chapter, we're looking at different types of conflicts. We're looking at conflicts that can exist in the workplace. We're looking at conflicts between employees. We're looking at conflicts between employee and employer. We're looking at different ways to handle conflicts within the workplace, and that's going to be a management style decision. So some of the things we're going to look at is facilitation. We're going to look at getting the parties together to work things out, whether or not parties need to be retrained after a conflict issue in terms of finding better ways to get along. So conflict management is something that we will see in most of our workplaces that we work at, whether it be in the medical profession or other professions that we've worked at on our way to getting where we are today. There's always the potential for conflict in the workplace. There's always that possibility you might not get along very well with a coworker. There's always that possibility that you might have to work with 2 coworkers who don't like each other. That you might be in a situation where you might have a manager who has several employees angry at him or her. So the potential for conflict, as we all know in our workplaces, can come up at any time, over any issue, over any situation. So those are kind of things we need to examine and look at this week as we talk about conflict management. What's very important here, guys, is something we've been talking about for our entire class, and that is professionalism. The best way to combat conflict is to not get involved in conflict. To always remember, in the medical profession, you are a professional. So the emphasis is on profession. And yes, there are going to be coworkers we don't get along with at times. Yes, there's going to be managers who we're going to have a disagreement with, or who are going to sometimes correct us or do those kind of things. The thing about any type of those situations is that we must handle it in a professional manner. We have to look and see what our facilities have in terms of conflict management and conflict resolution. Are there proper procedures and practices we can use and facilitate if conflict arises that might help resolve the situation in a more peaceful manner than what would happen if we just allowed it to fester and explode later on, which could be an embarrassment to both the facility and you as a professional. So those are kind of things to look at here as we talk about conflict management. Our final chapter this week is very interesting. We're going to look at the business side of the medical profession. So what's very interesting about this is we've talked about different aspects of the medical profession, from ethics and those kind of things. In the final part of this, what we want to examine here is, how do you run a medical facility, and what are the different types of medical facilities? So we're looking at things like a doctor might go out and start a solo practitioner, and you might end up working for a solo practitioner. And that could be very different from working in a large-scale medical facility. You might work in a family health care facility that has maybe 2 or 3 doctors and treat a specific clientele. You might work in a large facility, such as long-term health care facilities like a nursing home, or in a hospital setting itself too. So we have to understand the different styles of settings we can find ourselves employed at, and we also have to examine the different types of business operations they are going to have with one another, and how they are similar and how they are different. So there could be some things you would do in a solo practitioner that you wouldn't in terms of a large-scale medical facility. So we have to examine the business perspective and operations of our different facilities. We're also looking at different pay scenarios and different things we find ourselves working with as well too. We've talked about medical malpractice in the past, but we're looking at some of the other pay systems and other compensation systems that we know we're going to come in contact with. Like the chapter is talking about the workers' compensation system and how the workers' comp system is set up to deal with patients who have been injured on the workplace and are now seeking treatment for those injuries. Medicaid and Medicare is listed in this chapter. So we know that these are major issues in terms of the services and the funding they provide to a lot of our population here in the United States for medical assistance. So we have to look at how you deal with those kind of payment systems like Medicaid and Medicare. So very interesting, guys, in our final 2 chapters as we examine those kind of things. Remember here, guys, too, that the discussion board main posting due on the end of the day Wednesday, 2 replies due by the end of the day Sunday. To get your timeliness, you need to post on 3 separate days. And again, I am here all week if you have any comments, questions, or concerns. And with that, guys, have a great second half of the week and as we get near the end of the class.